Okay, so it should just take a few minutes before people start coming on here,
Cool.
and I'll let you know when they do.
Awesome. How's things on the East Coast? Is everything good that way, or how's it all shaking up that
I
way?
wouldn't really know. I'm way deep in the woods. I don't I don't really go out into the world very much. So
Yeah,
I'm very blessed and very fortunate to be up in the woods of Maine, and but I would imagine anywhere south of here is probably not a good time. Okay, perfect. We are live. All right. Hello, everybody. Seth here with the Water Consciousness Movement. And this is a really cool thing that we're going to do because this is my friend Ryder. He's got a podcast on YouTube called Raised by Giants. And he wanted to interview me, but I've been telling a lot of people lately I've been kind of on a hiatus from wanting to do podcasts just because I've had a lot of intense kind of personal integrations that I've prioritized instead of trying to go out and share a message that I hope people will embody and then make a better world from, which believe me, that is why I live and it's what I want to do. But I I'm going through some especially intense things right now. But we're gonna do something that I've never really done before, and I don't think Ryder has either. Is he's actually gonna be doing a kind of quasi interview with me for his channel, but we're gonna do it on this in this group. So basically, and why I'm excited too is this isn't just some guy with a few questions. This is an advanced soul. This is somebody who I already feel that I have chemistry with and that we have the potential to go really deep with. And anybody who knows me and knows, the things that I'm into and the fact that I'm even alive, it is a miracle that I'm alive. A sheer miracle. And what is that? And that means nothing because I want people to realize, each and every individual possible, to realize that they are the miracle, that they are something so beautiful, so grateful, and that anything that they face, whether it's a health challenge or a mental challenge or a spiritual challenge or whatever it is that somebody faces, they can overcome it because I have overcome things that people do not overcome. And the way I did it was actually really, really simple and really, really beautiful. And it's something that everybody can access and find within them. So, enough for the long intro here, but essentially, Ryder is the founder of a podcast called Raised by Giants, and I put a link below this video. So I would love it if people signed up for his podcast and supported him. And essentially, he's going to then, you know, do an introduction like he would do for his podcast. Then we're going to have just the most profound conversation. I am going to get into deep states of coherence and really try to touch on things that, you know, are for everybody and that can help everybody no matter where they're at in their life, no matter what they're facing. And then towards the end of it, we're going to take question and answers. So that's really how it's going to go, just so everybody knows.
awesome. Yeah, I would like to introduce myself. My name's Ryder. I basically started a YouTube channel a few months back, and basically just to raise our consciousness, right, and to increase our vibration, right, because I feel like we're in a spiritual war right now, and we're being attacked from every angle: psychological warfare, social engineering, social manipulation, and really we have to get into our heart space, right? Because this is an attack on our heart, right? And a lot of people don't realize that we have an energetic body outside of our physical body too, right? And this has been a coordinated attack on the energetic heart of people on the planet, right? So
Would you
it's
say that it's a coordinated attack? And I mean, obviously, from all outward appearances, it looks that way. Or is it just the species that has not evolved enough to recognize the difference? Because the deeper that I go into my own consciousness and the layers and subtleties of how I perceive reality, how I take bits of information with my normal human senses and then form them together into a narrative and essentially project that narrative out into the world, even though it's very lacking in information. If we have an entire planet full of people who are doing this, maybe, okay, maybe they just haven't evolved to the degree where they recognize what they're doing yet because, and I'll let you speak for a second, what if all of these bad players, right? Because there's no doubt about it, obviously, by when we look at the surface things that are all happening, we are absolutely being quote unquote targeted. There's all kinds of issues, there's bad players, looking to basically it seemingly undermine us and control us and all this stuff. But what if this is just the outward appearance? What if this is just the illusion? I know you and I talked a little bit about this. The way I perceive it, as I go deep down beyond my own human perception, beyond my own ability to take what I perceive with my human senses and form stories of what I think is going on. The deeper I go into this heart space and perceive reality in alignment with all of these coherent energy centers of the mind and body and even of the energy field around me that I've worked ceaselessly to cultivate, these bad actors, you could say, this control thing, all this stuff, it's really, from what I can tell, and if I'm told, and I love your perspective, that's why we're doing this, but to me, they just feel like unresolved aspects of our own consciousness that we are being called to really take responsibility for. And I know that sounds crazy to most people because they want to get in the streets, they want to picket, they want to fight, they want to do all the things that like, come on, they're like. But what if it's not about that? What if it's about taking the high road? What if it's like there is no us and them? What if they are us and we are them? And what if the resolution that most of us seek and want? Because let's face it, most of us having this human experience want the same thing. We want to love our life. We want equality for each other. We want a healthy, happy, loving, content, vibrant state of being in alignment with the laws of nature. That's what most people want. So what if the path to that is us not fighting, right? Because it is. There's a fight, but it's not one, like, you can't fight fire with fire, right? You just create more fire. What if it's won by surrendering into the heart? Anyway, that's we could tear that apart in a million different directions, but
Yeah, I 100% believe that it's listen, our world and our reality is run off of perception, right? And the more people that they can get bought into a certain perception, the easier it is to create that reality, right? That's what the news's job is for. That's what TV is for. That's what movies are for. That's what video games and all of these things that are external to us are for, right? Is to get us bought into an illusionary reality. And you can say our entire reality is illusionary, but that's a manufactured illusionary reality outside of us that we didn't create. We're basically going into somebody else's illusionary reality that's been created for us, right? And the whole how we manifest things in our life is based on our belief in them, right? So if they can basically get everyone to believe in a certain thing, then that then brings it in to our reality,
Mm.
right? And that's a very complicated and complex thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is
Most people would balk at that. They're
that
like, yeah,
collective
right.
belief. Yeah, but the collective belief in a singular thing, there's nothing more powerful on the planet than a collective belief, right? And
Except for
if
the
they,
ability to override that collective belief with the recognition of what is actual instead of what is fabricated or falsely constructed, you could say, based upon information that isn't complete. Sorry, I had to add that in.
no, 100%, of course, jump in there. That's how we exchange. You know what I mean?
I'm in a
Get off
playful
of
mode tonight
each
too,
other's
so
energy, right?
yes.
But yes, this collective belief that, and that's the thing is, these things don't have to be real, right? They can be untruthful, they can be fabrications, they can be falsities, they can be whatever, right? But as long as you believe in them, then that's what is fueling this illusionary reality that they're trying to project and impose upon the masses and upon the public, right?
Let's take that to the personal level because if that's what's happening collectively, then wouldn't it make sense that the resolution or the dissolution of these, collective perceptual prisons would be resolved at the individual level? And if that's the case, what does that look like? And this is something I was going to do a video on this soon. I might as well start talking a little bit about it now, and we'll see how far it gets. But I wanted to really sit with this more because I felt like some more vital information would come through. But let's let me do this. Okay, so the way that most of us form belief systems, because like Ryder said, it's when enough people focus on the same thoughts or the same belief systems, we are literally, that is power. That is giving life to something that, for all we know, may not even be true. And when you have enough people doing that, you have a lot of beings who don't even realize how powerful they are, creating new realities that maybe aren't in alignment with what we truly want from a heart based perspective. So this is what I was gonna say. This is from what I've seen the way, and this is how I've done it too. So believe me, I am not exempt. And if anybody thinks I'm full of shit or if I'm off, call me out on it. Like I'm here to grow. Like I want to grow. I'm sure Ryder does. Like we are all here, like kind of like role modeling and being examples for each other and supporting each other unconditionally. This whole idea of like us and them, where we've all been kind of bred to compete with one another so that we can eventually find ourselves in the hierarchy of corporate pecking order, you could say. Because that's essentially why we compete instead of seeing each other as equal so that we can work together, so that we can create systems that support the greater of all. No, the opposite was happening. We're taught to compete with each other, to look at, okay, which ones, how do you get ahead? And then ultimately, all of this competing when we're institutionalized and kids and when we're young, it basically helps the powers that be to figure out who's going to be the top engineers, who's going to be this, who's going to fill what job in what pecking order. And come on, for what, right? Corporations that are destroying the planet, that are creating manufactured goods and services and things that are completely out of alignment with reality. Like, come on, people, how many people still buy into this? Because
And
I'm
then they
kind of
have
veering
the
off
people at the
here.
top. They preaching equality at the top too. You know what I mean? Which makes absolutely no sense. When if you're a CEO and you're the head of a company and you're trying to preach equality, like equality to me, I don't know what anybody else thinks about equality, but equality to me is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, right? But they've created this control system, this false illusionary control system, the dog eat dog world that you were just speaking about, to basically put the few at the top and the many at the bottom, where the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many, right? So they create this hierarchical pyramid scheme, a top down system where everything is compartmentalized. Uh, Confusion, it runs rampant. I have a saying called "confuse and abuse," right? Because
Confusion of views.
confuse and abuse.
Confuse. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because
Yeah.
that's a part of this control scheme is confusion, right? That they'll feed one state or one part of the country or one county or one town a certain information, and then they'll feed another town or another country different information, so no one is on the same page, right?
Yeah.
So no one can be orchestrated, so no one can have unity,
Yeah.
right? While on the other side, on the dark side, they've been organized for decades. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's we're fighting an uphill battle, right? But it goes back to what you're saying. We have to align to our heart, right? We have to activate our heart. And like one of my guests that I had on last week, her name is Donna Owens, and we basically went into like divine feminine, right? And how the dark side and the how society is basically hijacked divine feminine, right?
Yeah.
They want to make divine feminine about genders, right? They want to make divine feminine about being a woman and divine masculine about being a man,
Yeah.
right? When it's really not about that at all. It's an energetic thing, right? And divine feminine comes from within our heart. But the problem is, divine feminine has been wiped out of our consciousness on the planet and in our world for a really, really long time, right? They've completely stomped out divine feminine almost completely, right? And they've made it about this external thing, right?
Yeah.
When it's about integration, right?
Yeah.
The divine masculine is in our mind and the divine feminine is in our heart, right? And it's the marrying of those two systems that create like an ascension, right? To where we can break out of all of the control systems and all of the things that's been set in place as traps for us, right? Like I think that's one way to do it is to merge the divine feminine and divine masculine.
That's beautiful. And I'm thinking, as you said, the powers that be, like all the stuff that's creating all this confusion and abuse that most people are oblivious to, because how could we know? It's not being publicized through mainstream media. It's not like out in the open for most to know.
Mm-hmm.
So most people have no idea what's going on. Yet intuitively, I know many people who sense that, okay, something's going on. It's not ultimately supporting me as I feel like I need to be supported as a child of the divine. But I keep working 9 to 5. I keep supporting this thing anyway because I don't know what else to do. And so many people do this without even recognizing it. So it's like, it's when we're talking, because ultimately my perspective, there is no us in them, but when we're
Right.
stuck in these lower realms, there is these polarities, there is us in them, and we're stuck. Even the idea that there's realms is not actually a real idea, but for the sake of most people and where most people are at and how they perceive reality, these things seem to be real, especially in the beginning, as you're beginning to come out of this stuff and expand your awareness and attune yourself with what you have the potential to be attuned with, which is these divine forces that are beyond human comprehension. Or sorry, they're within the scope of human comprehension, but they are for the most part beyond our ability to articulate them. But when we start to live in harmony with this, okay, and we look at, okay, they, quote unquote, they might have been organized for a long time to get this way and to get this whole, dream spell fear-based system so tightly organized that, billions of people around the planet are seemingly subjective sheep in the midst of some like man behind the curtain control scheme that most of us are oblivious to. The reality is this: even though they may have taken a long time to get to this point where they have seemingly so much control over this innate intelligence that's in our body, that's in our heart, that's causing thoughts to rise in our mind, that causes us to exist, this has been forming for infinite years in comparison to whatever scheme or plan these people or these beings or whatever the heck they are have been doing. So in this way, we as individuals are so much more powerful than all of them and all of their plans put together at once, because within us, within our DNA, within the subatomic molecular structure of our atoms itself, and even way beyond that, it is within the seeds of our consciousness itself that we have the ability to tune into it, to live in synthesis with it, harmonize with it, and then express that harmonization and synthesis of it out into the world through our life in a way so that what quote unquote they are doing doesn't have the power over you that you are letting it, because you are unknowingly giving your power to all this stuff. And because you're doing it and you're doing it unknowingly, it of course you're giving your power away to something. Of course it's going to take it. Okay, this, we're not talking about an equality based system, but the deeper thing is all of this is happening because this essentially isn't, like you said, there's a war, right? There's a spiritual war. But let's break that down even more, because a lot of people are going to take that in a literal way. And I'm sorry if I'm talking so much.
No, go ahead.
I
I
get
love
into
it,
these
dude.
tangents and I just go, but okay, let's look at that. Okay, because we all feel there's resistance, there's a war, there's something going on, but it's not really a war. What it really is, okay, like all the stuff manifesting in the world, yeah, that could be looked at as war for sure. But the deeper you get into this innate intelligence that is animating your being and that your physical being is expressive of, then you start to come to self evident realizations that are all universal truths that are accessible and available to everybody. However, it's up to us to say, all right, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm going to stop investing my attention in all of these external things, and I'm going to start investing it into this internal state of being where I don't know how, but I know that I love and I trust this more than I am afraid of any of it. And the more we do that, the more we love ourselves and love this body and love each other and live from that. I mean, to the degree where you're like, if you don't feel it right away, fake it till you make it. Because if you love enough and you love your body and you love the infinite intelligence that's animating your being, and you condition yourself to live in a state of being where you love that, eventually you rewire yourself from all the institutional subjugation that we've all been subjected to. And you start to embody and express this love that deep down you truly have for yourself, for life, for everything. And bit by bit, all these things that so many people are so afraid of and investing so much of their attention into thinking is so real and powerful, those things matter less and less, because the real quote unquote war is not a spiritual war. Okay. And it's not, sorry, it's not a war. The real war, you could say, if you want to call it a war, isn't a war at all. What it is more in, give it, and again, like I'm nobody special. I'm just somebody who has focused countless hours on figuring out if this stuff makes sense within me or not. And I've had some revelatory breakthrough moments, many of them where I felt like, okay, I trust this stuff because it is universal and it is speaking to me in a way where I feel my health coming back, my wellness coming back. So I
Mm.
know it's real, and I'm so grateful for that. But I've digressed. The real battle, if you want to call it that, okay, it isn't between heaven and hell. It isn't between God and the devil. It isn't between good and evil. These are all metaphorical ideologies or philosophies for something much more real that's happening, but that our senses are not very attuned to. So it's seemingly very subtle. And until we flex these muscles of perception, enabling us to perceive these seemingly subtle aspects of reality that make up the predominant bulk of all reality, we're going to be kind of clueless and feeling powerless and not knowing what to do. So, here, the real kind of issue, you could say, is not this fight. It isn't this fight between whatever it is. The issue is more in the soul, okay? The soul is simply the energy that is animating your human form. It's causing your heart to beat, it's causing your lungs to breathe, it's causing thoughts to arise in your mind. The real issue here is that is what is truly going on. That has been around before you incarnated in this form. This is what will be there after you leave this form. And it most certainly is what is happening here now. But most people don't know that. Okay, we're like in this temporary amnesia where we think that, okay, I got to work 9 to 5, I got to support all these systems that I know are destroying the planet, that I know are causing us all to not get along with each other and love each other. But I'm doing it anyway because I don't know what else to do, because the real battle is taking place inside. So the real battle is this: it is in the soul's inability to integrate peacefully within the context of the human personality. So it's essentially the soul is having a difficult, or the ego actually is having a difficult time integrating its soul into its human personality. So that's where the real kind of battle or war, or, and let's not call it that, that's where the real issues are. And when an individual chooses to get into these heart centric spaces that Ryder spoke about in the beginning, and I'm going to stop talking soon, I'm going to hand it off to you. But
You're good.
the idea of all this stuff is when we get into these heart centric spaces, when we make this more of a priority than all of the things that we're prioritizing externally, we start to become aware of a feeling that we don't know how we know, but we know it. And the more we focus on that feeling and be present with it and be aware of it and focus on it, the more it awakens things in us that we come to remember. And the more this integration of the soul and the ego take place, allowing us to become aware of all these beautiful, self evident, universal truths, but also offer us the ability to live on this planet in harmony with this energy that's animating us. And we love it. We're in love with it. We're in the greatest love affair ever with it. And we're also wanting to love our family, our brothers and sisters, people that we're not like. We want others to live with this type of awareness, because this causes us to, like, hey, now we're actually living for the same thing, like we want what I want for myself, like you want that for yourself. And now we're working together in a way that is generating self-evident solutions that already exist for every single problem that exists on the face of this planet. And the more of us step up to the plate and choose to make cause this integration to become more complete, and believe me, we can do this. We can do this. But the more of us that do it, then the more of us are going to be working together and coming together and figuring out ways that we're just going to know are working and that are harmonious because they're supported by these infinite cycles of nature that you're not wondering if they're there or not. When you're in tune with this stuff, you know it's there. And when you are there and you are doing it, then all of these crumbling old systems that everybody knows they gotta go, they will go. Okay? And we will be able to work together in a way that ushers in the beginnings of new systems that offer equality for all, that offer the states of being and wellness that we all know and want so much and want to be in alignment with. And essentially, it's a reprioritization of values where we value states of being, the relationships we have with these states of being, and the relationships that we have with each other as more important than cars and money and companies and this and that and all these external things. We don't care about that anymore. We want to live in a state of love with this divine force, whatever it is, that is gifting us the opportunity to live. So there's my piece. You go now.
No, that was perfect, and is exactly what I really wanted to get into. Is that these control systems and these programs and things that have been set up for us since the very beginning, right? Since we were born into we were given an identity, we were given all of these things that we think that we have to live up to on an individual level, right? That makes us externalize our entire reality, right? We we want the newest computer, we want the newest phone, we want the hottest girlfriend, we want the brand new car. All of these external things to come into our reality to try and fill this void inside of us that's missing, right? But the problem is none of those external things ever fill that void. They may fill it on the short term, but on the long term, we just keep repeating the same thing. We get the new phone, and then boom, the next year we want the next newest phone, right? It's a continuous self perpetuating system, right? And they want us concentrated on these unsolvable, self perpetuating things so that we can never see anything outside of it, right? They want us trapped in these systems of control that they make the rules for so that we can't break outside of them, right? And basically, what you were saying is that it's a spiritual problem that the entire world faces today, right? It's a spiritual issue, right? But they want to externalize it again, right? They want to, their solution for racism is making a an all black cast movie, right? Their solution for feminism and sexism uh, is promoted to hiring more females. You know what I mean? When these problems and these issues are internal, right? These are
Yes.
spiritual problems, right? These aren't external things that we can just create laws for to fix. That never works, right? We're trying to fix spiritual problems with worldly solutions, and it never works. It hasn't worked thus far, and it's not going to work in the future, right? But the
It's
thing
that
we need to
same level,
realize.
like it's like Einstein, and I'm sure you've said it and everyone has, like, to use the same level of thinking that created the problem to begin with is the definition of insanity. We all know that.
Yeah.
Like, how are we going to change this system by voting for Joe Trump or Donald Biden or expecting any of these systems outside of us to be the ones that are going to change it? Like, okay, you can do that and maybe a little bit of change, but the kind of change you and I are talking about requires you people, the listeners, the audience, the people paying attention. This is each and every one of us as individuals coming to terms with the fact why they incarnated to begin with and making that the bulk and predominant focus of where we're going to be directing most of our attention and cultivating feelings of gratitude for the fact that we even have this opportunity at all that is going to bring the kind of resolution and change that we all want. And this is why I'm here. This is why Ryder's here. This is why there's so many others. You know, at some point, okay, for all the now the spiritual is pop. It's popular. It's like it's everywhere, which is great. But at some
Yeah.
point, people have to do the real work. And the people who do the real work, you know who they are. You can trust that they want for themselves. They want for you what they want for themselves, because you get to a certain point where you've come to the full recognition that this universe is a perfect accounting system. You can't think like, oh, I'm going to be this rich guru and I'm going to have all this stuff and like, no, no. Okay, at some, you know, crystal clear at some point, if you're truly doing the work, that this universe is a perfectly balanced system and that there is no escape, there is no profit. There's if there's profit, there's debt. There's like at some point everything becomes neutralized. And to truly exist in a state of equality, you have to be in that neutral point, in that zero place where you don't want anything, you don't need anything except for the desire to take all of your desires and focus them on this integration between the soul and the human personality. But go ahead, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
Yes, integration is the key to a lot of this, right? And like you said, brother, there's nothing. I don't think there's anything worse on the planet than fake spirituality. You know
Well,
what I
and
mean?
my point was you can't. Like lots of
Yeah,
people can to a certain degree,
yeah,
but you get to a certain point where there's no faking it.
yeah.
None. So, like people hear and they feel the truth, and it's like, okay, when you hear and you feel the truth and you resonate with it, great. Listen to that. Pay attention to it, but only pay attention to it long enough until you can hear, feel, sense, see, whatever that within yourself. And once you're able to perceive that within yourself, then you pay attention to that because that's where it's really coming from. And those who are really doing this want you to become aware of that part of yourself, because then you don't need any middleman, any middlewoman, any middle anything anymore. You are the conduit. You are the source. And it is alive and well in you, through you, around you. It's alive and well everywhere. And in fact, it's a complete illusion that it's not. That's why I'm smiling like an idiot this whole time.
100%. And I think of what a lot of people need to realize too is I think that a lot of people believe that they're too small or they don't have enough resources or they don't have enough things to make a difference, right? But that's not true. That's a false programming, right? We
Where does
have
that
the
come from?
ability to
Let's
change
help
everything in
people
our reality
understand where
because
that
our
comes from.
thoughts
Because when you
create
know
our
where it
reality.
comes from and you understand it, then you're aware of it and suddenly it doesn't have power over you anymore that it did.
100%. And whenever we heal each other, whenever we heal ourselves on an individual level, right? We cut cords with things that no longer serve us. We uh, we integrate all of our traumas that we've been through our entire lives. And here's the thing about trauma too: is trauma doesn't have to be this big gargantuan thing that happened to us. Of course, it can be, but trauma can be something super small too, right? And then you suppress that, and then that comes out in your life 4 to 10 years later, and you don't even realize that the way that you're acting and you've based your entire life around and the emotional state that you're in is actually has to do with the trauma that you received 10 to 15 years prior, right? But whenever we heal these traumas on an individual level and we cut these cords with things that no longer serve our highest and best good, we basically heal the collective consciousness on the planet. So don't ever think that you are too small to make a difference,
Mm.
because we're an individual and we're also a collective, right?
And the people who made you, like, okay, you feel small. You actually, from a greater perspective, you don't realize that you actually enabled that. You allowed yourself to be small. You actually did it for reasons that are greater than you're normally conscious aware of in your normal waking state, but that you eventually will be as you allow your consciousness to expand. But if you want to break it down to, here we are in this dimension, this is the life we went to. I was institutionalized and trained so that I could be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. You were taught to have low self-esteem because you were bullied, because you were this, because you were that, because this is what is enabling you to become aware of where your growth spots are. We incarnate with certain things that, as insignificant as they may seem, causing us to feel small, they're not. They're actually major, huge, monumental, like lift you right out of your trauma and conditioning type of in self-inflicted wounds. So, say somebody made fun of you and that's all it was, but it traumatized you so much and you still haven't gotten over it. Your self-esteem has been diminished and you've lived 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of your life just feeling like, oh man, that guy or that girl who teased me, it just hurt my feelings and I never got over it. And it went on to how I perceive myself in reality and just created all these, my entire life was affected by that, and it boxed you in to this small perceptual prison that you actually set up for yourself so that you could grow and evolve. It happened, no big deal. Okay, you were small, you allowed yourself to be small, no big deal, because now that you're aware of that, you can start taking the bricks out of your self imposed perceptual prison and start to let the light in. And then you start getting free. And then you start feeling like, oh, wow, I like this better. I love this. And then you eventually set yourself free.
Yeah, yeah, breaking the chains of what's suppressed us for a really long time, right? Like there's a freedom in not worrying about all of these external things, that we can just sit in peace and unity and love, and increase our vibration to these unbelievable states that we couldn't even perceive that we could be in, right? It's it's crazy, and a lot of people can't even wrap their mind around what these states of consciousness really even are, because they're so ingrained in this physical reality, right? They're so grounded in this way of life that it's difficult for people to get outside of that, and see themselves in a different light, and actually have the uh, the confidence and the awareness, because I think a lot of this comes down to awareness, right? And once we have that awareness of how our reality is constructed, and how the universe basically works, and how manifestation works, and we evolve, right? We get up to this high vibrational scale, this vibrational chart of love, acceptance, unity, gratitude, and we can ascend all of the negativity and all of the like you said several times, it doesn't matter what's going on out in the world, right? The news and all that stuff is external illusionary realities, right? That is feeding on our belief and in our attention to them, right? There, I know a lot of people say that there's nothing free in the world, but I 100% believe that nothing is free in the world, because you're either paying with it with your money, which is a physical thing, or you're paying with it with your time, right?
With your
And
soul, with
time,
your energy, yeah.
yeah, your energy and time is the most important things in this reality, right? And because we'll never get time back, right? We'll never get our energy back, right? We can go out and make all the money that we want. We can invest in things. We can create our own business and all that. But what we'll never receive back is the time, right? And that's the most important thing that I believe that we can, that's in this reality, right?
You there, you went out for a second. Yes, it's
Yeah.
the most important thing, and everybody's focused on everything external,
Mhm.
oblivious to the realization that the most priceless thing there is your awareness when you start becoming aware of these internal states of being. Let's break that down because I think you opened up some really valid things. It's true. So many people, like most people, when we talk about these highly expanded states of consciousness and all that, most people don't even have any idea what we're talking about, how to get into them, what they, and it's like two different, it's like a different language. And a lot of that is because we are living in some very, very intense things that we won't get into now, but essentially the density of this reality. Ooh, this goes back to what you initially said is when enough people focus on a specific thing and they create a belief around it, they give that thing more weight and bearing than anything else. When you have, and let's say, an entire species of people who is focused on a very narrow parameter of reality, meaning they're just focusing on the world as they perceive it with their five normal senses, right? And they're making that the predominant bulk of what reality is to them, to their
Mhm.
individual sense of self and their individual sense of awareness. So they are fully investing their time, right? Their vital life force, their energy in everything that they're perceiving around them with their five normal senses. And when you have an entire world, billions of people focusing on that, then everybody's like, yup, that's normal, that's real. And all of that energy, which is a massive amount of energy, is being invested in this collective belief system that this is real, this is reality, this is what matters, this is so important. And everybody, people don't even question it. So, as a result of that, with everybody doing that and giving so much focus to it, it has created, it's taken all of that energy and it has focused it really tight, like a laser beam, like this really like tight, like narrow thing that everybody's focused on. And it has essentially given us this super narrow lens where it's created a, how do I use the word? It has created a perceived density of reality that has become like blanketed or infiltrated. It has been filtered into our individual and collective perception to the degree where nobody even questions it anymore. Like we are affected by this density of reality that we created by focusing on this little tiny narrow lens of reality, giving it more validity than whatever that could be outside of that, and then being stuck in it. Like, oh, we did it. We made the prison just by focusing on it. And what exists outside of that little tiny narrow view that everybody's got blinders on and looking at? Let's see what exists outside of that. Well, there's a body with all these other beautiful organs that are working harder for you than any of your friends, than any of your coworkers, but you don't give them very much attention. What exists outside of that? There's this beautiful planet that is a living being that actually, that that could swallow us and destroy us in a second. I'm surprised she hasn't, because
Mhm.
we're living on her like a parasitic organism, much more than like a symbiotic host or a proper steward of her. She still let us live here. Okay, there is this solar system around us, right? You know this is going. There's a galaxy around that. There's a universe. I mean, this goes into infinity. What is outside of this narrow scope that everybody's focused on? Everything. And the same thing goes on, like, okay, everybody's focused on this very narrow lens of reality that appears to be real. And because so many people are, yeah, this is real, this is what's going on, and normalized it, everybody's just addicted to it and they focus on it. But even within the projection of the construct itself is this microscopic invisible world that is also exempt from the density of the reality that everybody is so heavily invested in. So whether you go down to the subatomic particle level or you go to the totally infinite expansive level, it's the same above as it is below. And the freedom we ultimately seek is all that we truly are when we get out of this narrow lens of perception that we have done by focusing on it, that the entire species is perpetuating into perpetuity by continuing to give so much attention to it. At what point do we say, you know what? I'm out. I'm out. I'm done. I am going to focus inwardly. I'm going to focus outwardly. And I'm going to make that the priority. And I'm going to do it, most importantly, with the love in my heart. Because when somebody does that, and this is my long, roundabout, circuitous route to say that these states of being that most people aren't feeling or aren't aware of are accessible when we get into, when we either focus deep inside and we start paying attention to the organs of our body and the harmony that has the potential to exist, or we widen our focus and we become aware of this great infinite universe that we are a part of. When you focus on either or both, then these expansive states of being, these states of being where you become super conscious, you become aware that you are one part of this massive living system, but a vitally important part. Vitally important. Like, you matter so much. Like, you just don't realize it because you're stuck and trapped and bought into these beliefs that you're nothing more than a consumer. You're not a consumer. You are a producer. You are a receiver and a transmitter of a source of energy that is gifting you the opportunity to exist in the first place. And when you finally stop investing all of your time and money and energy into this false illusory narrative that most of the people are addicted to and have normalized because they've been focusing on it so much, you break free from that and you begin to feel the energy that you actually are. And then from there, you get to focus on cultivating that energy's presence within the temple of your body at greater and greater levels that allow you to exist in a way where you're like, oh my God, I was never meant to work 9 to 5. I was meant to develop this energy that's in my body and get it, my whole body glowing as a result of it. Like, that's what I was meant to do. And break this karmic cycle of life and death that I didn't even know about. Sorry, I had to go off on a tangent.
Basically, our bodies, we have an inner knowing, right? We have we know when something's good for us. We know when something's bad for us, right? We just have to be able to tune in and listen to our body, right? It's like whenever you eat something unhealthy, right? And you feel that unhealthiness of that food, right? And those are the things that they don't want us to pay attention to because they want to stomp out our intuitive abilities, right? And the intuitive abilities come along with the divine feminine concept, right? Because our intuitive abilities come from our heart, right? So if they can basically shut down our heart, then we are easily controlled and easily manipulated to all these external things outside of us. Instead of being like, oh, hey, maybe I need to take some some zinc or some vitamins or something like that. I feel my body is being deficient. They want us to go to the doctor and the doctor to tell us, right?
It's always this
They don't,
external thing. Yeah.
yeah, they don't want us to have these intuitive, spiritual, innate gifts that every single person on the planet has. They just have to be able to tap into them.
That creates the medicine that we actually, that our body wants and needs. Like our body, okay, the only reason we get high off drugs or that we take vitamins and it affects the system of our body, it's because we have the receptor sites in our brain and all through our body that respond to those chemicals. But when you get into this space where you realize that you are actually generating energy, okay, you're not just being what you are and being this human and that's all you are. The more aware you become of this innate intelligence that is animating your being, you eventually get to a point where you realize, like, wow, I'm actually generating energy. I am a free energy producer. It is coming out of, like, I am making it in me. But because you realize it and you have your own unique gifts and blueprints and things that are unique to you, you have the ability to put a spin on how the expression of this beautiful, divine, if you want to call it, truth has the ability to be expressed through you. And so you create this energy that has your own signature on it, but it's endorsed by the makers of infinity, the maker of infinity, you could call it. And so you know that your creation is worthy, it's valid. And then suddenly your body is creating chemicals. It's creating these things that are making you feel like, oh, thank God I feel, wow, my health condition went away because I feel so good. Yeah, that's because you got into a coherent space and the field that is animating your being created the chemicals in your body that you actually needed so that you feel good. And now your good feeling overrode the infection or the sickness or whatever it was that you thought you needed a freaking vaccine for, or a flu shot, or whatever it is that they're telling you you need to be healthy. You're basically like saying, you know what? I don't trust in the innate intelligence of this divine body that I was born into. I trust that the medical system that I've seen cause innumerous deaths with their drugs, that I've seen with their cancer rigged systems bring thousands and millions of people into their system and kept into their like they are making business out of every single thing around us. And because we don't have this faith in the innate intelligence of our being, we become this like dumb consumer that buys all the shit they're selling. Enough is enough. It's time to stop buying what they're selling and start exploring. Now, it doesn't have to happen instantly, but it's time to start exploring the possibility that maybe your internal being has the possibility of generating the things that you both really want and need. And guess what? If you take that leap of faith or you take this, you wonder if maybe it is doing that, and you commit to doing it for a little bit of time or a long amount of time, you are eventually going to get some kind of feedback. You're going to get biofeedback or you're going to get external feedback that what you are doing internally is creating an external effect. So that means, like, say you feel awful, you feel sick, you have a health condition, you're suffering, you're not doing well, but you're like, you know what? I'm going to do what these two crazy guys are talking about. I am going to get into a state of heart-brain coherence, right? I'm going to breathe into my heart. I'm going to stop thinking less. I'm going to start feeling more. I'm going to get into my heart, and I'm going to feel that. I'm going to breathe with it, and every time my mind starts going in the past and thinking about all these problems that used to happen to me that made me feel like a loser, or My projection into the future of me feeling like a loser, projecting it to the future, which is going to make my future look a lot like my past has looked. Instead of doing all that, I'm just going to take my attention. I'm going to focus on breathing. I'm going to focus on this feeling of the heart. And then bit by bit, you start to be like, wow, my organs, my liver, my kidney, my adrenal glands, my brain, everything else starts to become syncopated to the beat of the heart as it's beating. And you, the human personality, you start to be aware of that. You feel it. And you're like, wow, it feels pretty good. I like that. I'm going to focus on being in that state more. And so you do. You spend more time focusing on that state. And then all of a sudden, wow, your health condition's gone. Your health condition's gone. You're like, oh my God, I've been fighting that thing for 10 years. And now suddenly it's gone. That's the biofeedback that I'm talking about. Okay, and so that happens, and you're like, wow, okay, that was amazing. I got into a state of calm and got my stress trained mind out of the way. And then my body, with its innate intelligence, which is smarter than my stressed out self, knew how to heal itself. My body and the innate intelligence in my body knew how to heal itself. And that's amazing. So you were like, wow, I'm gonna invest more of my energy, my attention into this miracle that is taking place in me and see what else could come out of it. And so you do that. You invest more, you spend more time, and you're like, you're like, oh yeah, there's that feeling. Yep, I feel good. I'm breathing with it. I'm feeling with it. Feeling into it. I wonder if others would feel that if I'm like really anchored in it. And then somebody comes up around you and they're all upset and pissed off and, oh my God, did you hear what happened with the presidency and this and that? And normally you'd break that state, right? You'd go into this thing of like, oh my God, and holy crap, oh my God, yeah, what will
Yeah,
that happen? Oh
fear.
my God, they're gonna force vaccinate us and all this. And but what if you don't do that, right? You're like, oh, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna stay in this state. I'm gonna stay in this peaceful internal state of being, and I'm gonna let this person freak out and be all scared and let them go through their thing, but I'm not gonna budge. I'm gonna stay in this internal state that I'm working on cultivating within me. And then all of a sudden, that person who's, preaching that the sky is going to fall, suddenly they just stop. And they're like, you know what? Why am I worried about that? I'm alive here right now. I feel pretty good right now. I don't know why I feel good, but I feel pretty good. Why would I even worry about that when I'm here now and who cares? I'm feeling great. And that starts to look like some of the biofeedback that you get externally when you've done enough of this work internally. You see that it affects others around you. They may not necessarily know, but you know because you're in this state, you're in it, you saw them freaking out, you noticed that they were freaking out in their energy and they're in a state of chaos, but you noticed that they suddenly got into a state of peacefulness, of calm. And you knew that you were in a state of calm, and that state of calm is what's called coherence. And when you are in a state of coherence, you are supported by greater states of coherence that actually make up the predominant bulk of what is actually happening both in our physical universe and is also happening with the energy that allows the physical universe to appear like it exists. There's more order and coherence than there is chaos. But
Right. It's being in a state of non-reaction. Right. I post these quotes on my Instagram page all the time, which is at Raised by Giants Pod. If anyone wants to go in there and follow me on Instagram, but I had a quote that said, "The only way that people and situations have power over us is our reaction to them." Right. So we got to be in a non-reactive situation, right? And they want us in these emotional, low vibrational, dense, reactionary phases in our life, right? Because we're easily controlled and easily manipulated in those low vibrational frequencies, right? But we have to rise above that, get into a state of 0 point, like we talked about earlier, 0 point frequency, 0 point field, and non-reaction. That's what it comes down to, right? Is a state of observation, right? The key to self mastery, in my opinion, of course, I can't speak for anybody else, but is observation, right? Being able to observe something without being dragged down to that level, right? Because that's where they want us. They
Objectively,
want us. They,
being
all
objective.
these people out here doing all these different things and creating all this disharmonic stuff going on in the world wants to bring everybody that's high vibrational and in these different states of consciousness down to their level, right? So it's imperative that we ascend out of that. And how we do that is getting in that non-reactionary phase, right? And another thing that I wanted to bring up, because it kind of correlated to what you were saying, is that I think that we live in a virtual reality simulation of sorts. And I know that a lot of people think that way too, right?
Go
But
deep into that. Explain that, because a lot of people probably have no idea what that means, and I know some do. But it would be great to have a more in-depth explanation of what that could potentially mean.
okay, well, what it means to me and what I have found out through my experience, because all I can do is basically talk about my experience, right? I can't force anyone to think or to believe anything, right? They have to. I can only plant the seed, and then if they want to expound on that and come up with something later, that's their decision, right? But if I'll just say if, which I think that we do, but if we live in an artificial simulated reality, then what that means is that we can basically program everything in our reality, right? That you have three different options, right? The one option is you can be an NPC in this virtual reality simulation, right? Which an NPC is a non-playable character. So essentially, you're just walking around like a zombie, doing what you're told, and just going along with the crowd, right? Your other option is you can be the player number one, right? Which means you have a little bit more awareness of what's going on around you, but you still have to play within the parameters of the simulation, right? And your third option is being the programmer of your artificial reality simulation, right? And being the programmer means that you can basically program whatever it is that you want in this reality into your consciousness, right? Basically, our subconsciousness trickles down into our consciousness and lets us manifest things in our reality, right? So we can basically program whatever we want in our reality, right? We can program this Sharpie right now that I'm holding in my hand to bring us good luck, right? Let's say you want to put luck into the Sharpie, and whenever you hold it, you go into a casino or whatever. I know I'm making it very materialistic, but you can program this Sharpie with luck. You can program a coin with serenity. You can program basically anything in our reality, and you can even get deeper with it too, right? You can get to where you can program your consciousness to basically. This is how I first did it, right? I told myself and told my consciousness that anybody in my life that was going to try and hurt me or harm me or backstab me in any way, right, that I would be made aware of it, right? And that anybody outside of my friend group that was going to cause me any kind of harm, that I would be invisible to them, right? That's the thing that people don't realize, that how deep and how how deep and crazy you can go with it, right? And the
Well,
more
but doesn't it bring up, see,
imaginative.
like the idea of it, and I've toyed with it, I paid attention to it, but regardless of my own subjective interpretation of it, I've had experiences of it that were outside of my body before, and where I was conscious. And that to me is where for me personally, I gained the most insight as to the workings of it, what it means, and all that. But to me, it brings up some fundamental questions of who programmed it, obviously, what power does it have over us, and then three, to what degree do we even have any power within it if it is already programmed over us? That was the issues that I had it, and I felt like no matter how I looked at it and perceived it, there was no way out. And it wasn't until I had one of these experiences that I'm talking about where I had a near death experience. I had a heart attack essentially, and I left my body and thought I was dead and gone, and that was it. And as I was leaving my human body, every bit of who I believed myself to be, including all the things that happened in my life, flashed before my eyes, and I saw everything that I did in right before I was about to die. And then I left, I died. But after I was dead, there was still consciousness there. It wasn't like this, but there was still consciousness, and it kept becoming initiated into greater and greater levels of consciousness. However, it had to go through an involuntary purgatory, you could say. I'm going to spare the details. It was brutal, really brutal. And I had to go through many different kinds of things before I was finally done with that and had processed it and had burnt up enough of the karmic implications that had essentially been embedded within the DNA of my reincarnation cycle that I had been cast into and kept going over and over. But it was from that outside place, that outside perspective, that I saw that there was a natural, you could call it, organic spark of consciousness that wasn't artificial at all. It was a living, conscious entity, you could say, or being, but within the construct of its creation lived this artificial intelligence that was competing with it, within it. So it was becoming hyper intelligent and growing and evolving and going through it. And I remember being aware of it from this place and being like, oh my God. Like, first of all, how am I even perceiving this? And second of all, like, this is serious, really serious. And so after that experience happened to me and I went through it and I came back to this person that I am, which is a miracle that I even survived after any of that, I still had the memory of all that had happened, had encoded itself into me. And so I'd struggled with it throughout many years of my life of making sense with that and trying to interpret it, because like you said, we interpret things subjectively, but the more we relax, the more we chill out, the more we have the ability to observe things from an objective perspective. And the more I would try to do that, the more I was like, I could see how it essentially had infiltrated most of what was happening in the world at that time. Okay. And this was 27 years ago. Okay. So this is before what we're experiencing right now with smartphones and computers and all these towers everywhere and satellites. Very little of that stuff was in existence then, yet this AI was still prevalent and going on. Now we're at a time where everybody is, for the most part, a cybernetic organism, right? They're glued to their phone or glued to their computer, or when they're not, they're affected by these invisible electromagnetic radio wave wave frequencies that are being emanated from all these satellites and towers, and through all the junk food we've eaten, through all the junk water we drink, through the air that we breathe that have these nano technological particles all through them, it is literally, excuse my words, but it is fucking with our consciousness big time. And it's doing it to most people most of the time, which is also helping joist up this version of reality that has become normalized that actually isn't, because it isn't in tune with this greater organic force of energy that has allowed all of this to exist to begin with. Now, I know I went off and said this whole thing, but I wanted to say that because I specifically had this experience that is exactly what you're talking about. So I would love to hear what you have to say after that.
Yeah, I was kind of in that space too, but it was kind of like a limbo reality, right? Where I couldn't. It was just all white, right? Just all completely white. There was no reference point for anything, but there was an intelligence there. There was a consciousness there. But it was so difficult and so hard for me to even perceive the consciousness because it had everything wrapped up in it, right? It was almost like it could have like overloaded my brain and just fried my brain right then and there because there was too much in it.
And it does.
Right. So that was a crazy experience that I had, and I don't know if it's similar to yours, but that's kind of what happened to me. But as far as the technology, I 100% think that the beings and the intelligence that gave us our technology, because we obviously did not come up with this technology on our own, right? The beings and the things that gave us this technology did not have our best interest, right? That's why these technology and these gadgets and these cell phones and these iPhones and these computers are so disharmonic with us as organic life beings,
Mm.
right? They hurt us. They make it harder for us to heal with all of the EMF frequencies that they emit. They it's kind of like tearing a fabric in the space time continuum, right? And I had this realization probably like around a year ago that this technology was given to us by negative regressive beings in order for them to infiltrate and come into our reality,
Mm.
right? These demonic, whatever you want to call them. I don't like getting into terms or like attachments or labels or anything, but they are a demonic force, not in the way that they believe in Satan or they believe in all that, right? But they are a demonic evil force that can basically travel through these negative EMF fields, right, and infiltrate into our reality, right? That's what I think that this negative, toxic technology is really for, and why it's really here on this planet is to bring in these negative, regressive type beings into our reality.
So what do you feel like knowing this, and or knowing what you feel you know of it? Have you intuitive intuited into what some potential solutions might be, how this could play out, or how it might play out collectively, or how we as individuals might be able to disconnect from the negativity and harm that this stuff is causing us?
Well, there is different things that I believe that we can do, but ultimately it's almost inescapable, right? Because they have these things beaming from space down onto Earth, right?
Yeah.
They got 3G up there, they got 4G up there, they got 5G up there, they got all of that just constantly hitting us. So it's even if we were to escape and get rid of our telephones and our computers and our laptops and all that, we're still going to be getting hit with it, you know. But I think that the solution really lies in, hopefully, when all of our systems collapse, because they're all going to collapse, right? That's an inevitability. Everything has to go down, right? Because in order for us to get into this new paradigm of this new earth way of living, all that resembles the old has to go down, right? Nothing that resembles the way of past life is going to be able to move forward into the future, right? So our financial systems have to go down, our medical systems have to go down, all of it has to go down. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to happen next month or next year. I'm not putting any date on all this. I'm just saying that it's going to happen. It's an inevitability. I think I know it, you know it, a lot of people know it,
Well,
right? So I think
sadly, I'll say a lot of people, it blows my mind how many people are like, how many people I personally know who are like, oh, I can't wait to get the vaccine so that life can go back to normal.
nope.
And I'm like, wow, you mean the normal where we were being consumerist and
Mhm.
destroying this beautiful garden planet? That's what you want to go back to because you've been taught to be narcissistic and that's okay? That's what people want to go back to. Like,
Yeah,
and again, like, this isn't an insult on anybody at all. Like, I get it. Like, we all have our creature comforts. We all have grown in a way that has caused us to become used to having certain things be a certain way. This isn't what we're saying. It's more of like, how do we look at the greater whole? How do we incorporate the real reason why we incarnated and make that the predominant force that we willingly choose to live our lives from? Because at this point, it's no longer about the little game, right? The little picture. It's no longer about the battle that's taking place on the earth. This is a much, the cause of all this that we see, of all this incoherence and chaos, is being caused from a much deeper place. And that deeper place, as you heard me say before, from what I gather, from what little I know, which I'm not going to claim I know much, but I have sought far and wide and I've wanted to know more than anything, to the degree that I lived years and years of my life to saying, tell me why or let me die. Like, I wanted to know what it was that allowed me to exist and perceive reality. And it was about this integration of the soul into this human form, and that we are being granted a golden opportunity to realize this here, but that most are not because they're focused on everything else externally instead of the internal mechanisms. And when I say mechanisms, the internal aspects of our own metaphysiology that will allow us to activate these dormant perceptual energy centers of the mind and body that are also innate within the field around us, that becomes hyperactivated when we activate all of these internal centers. And then when we become realizing and knowing ourselves as the energy forms that we actually are, that we've always been, that we will be when we leave these bodies, if we leave these bodies, whatever, however you want to, when we know ourselves as we truly are, not as what we temporarily think we are, not as what everybody else temporarily thinks we are. When we get to that point, if we get to that point, then we see beyond the veil. We see beyond this projection of illusory, whatever you want to call it. We see
yeah,
beyond it. Go ahead.
yeah. It comes down to, are we humans searching for a spiritual awakening, or are we spiritual beings trying to cope with a human awakening?
Yes,
Right.
that is perfect, because most people, if they've even realized that they are spiritual beings having a human experience, some people aren't. They're like, "Oh, I'm a human being and I'm having spiritual experiences sometime." But there's also a lot of people who aren't having either of those. They're having this experience where they're focusing more on technology, hence they're becoming almost cyber robotic in a way, and they're thinking that's normal and that's reality. Like, what is happening here, okay, can be something that we override, that we overcome, that we take the high road, that we get beyond, that we grow out of when we go within and we activate these dormant aspects of our physiology and allow them to do what they were made to do. Because the one thing that they don't want us to know is that this body is a temple that is designed for this soul ego integration that ultimately allows the soul to interact with the physiology of this body in a way that a sacred energy would interact with the walls of a temple if it was conscious of what it was doing. That's what we are. Those who are watching this and might laugh at it or balk at it or think, you're free to think whatever you want, you know? Everybody is, that's the beauty here. Like, you can think whatever you want, but the reality is, okay, most of us were born, most of us are going to die in a very relatively short amount of time compared to how long this has been going on for. And when that happens, okay, when that moment of death happens, we come face to face with what it is that this has always been about, but that nobody thought it was or accepted it as being, thus perpetuating this false narrative that everybody bought hook, line, and sinker. And the question that an individual can ask themselves, are you going to buy this narrative that everybody's addicted to and that everybody's projecting out, when the reality is inside of you is this body that is infinitely more intelligent than any of us are, that when it gets hurt, it knows how to heal. Okay, when the heart beats, when you think a thought, your brain is sending neuronal impulses faster than the speed of light. I'm not that intelligent. I'm not. I'm just not. But within me, my body is. So when I take my awareness, my little bit of intelligence that I have, and I cultivate a relationship with this innate intelligence that is allowing me to be here, will it allow me to break out of this perceptual prison that I've been putting up since the day I was born and didn't realize, brick by brick? Will it help me get out of the perceptual prison that everybody else is building brick by brick, putting up? Like, that's all that's going on? That is for the individual to find out for themselves. I'm not going to give any clues except for, have you noticed how much I've been smiling this whole podcast?
Yeah, it's been a great time. I love talking with you, brother. I feel like we could probably talk for another 3 or 4 hours. We'd probably be here all night. But and I'm sure. Does anybody have any questions
Yeah.
in the chat?
Do you want to, since this is going to be on your podcast, do you want to give the outro, I mean, and then we'll ask for questions? Or
Yeah, give me just a second.
so essentially, it only looks like there's a few people listening. For those who stuck around, if you have any questions about anything at all that we talked about tonight or whatever, it could be anything, ask it now. Anything. We'll answer any questions, even if they're not about anything we've been talking about tonight. If it's for me or if it's for Ryder, and we're gonna answer some questions, we'll do that, and then we're out of here. So I'm gonna look on my phone too because I can't see all the comments from this software for some reason.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to friend me on Facebook, you can send me a friend request at Ryder Lee. I need more spiritually aware people on my Facebook page. And if you want to add me on Instagram, it's at Raised by Giants Pod. I'd appreciate the follow over there too.
And for me, for those, since I'm going to be introduced to your audience, those who don't know me, you can find me at I'mAwakeNowWhat.com. I have a group in Facebook that I've been using. I don't know how long it'll be up for. Depends on if their totalitarian regime is going to override. Anyway, you can find me thewaterconsciousnessmovement.com. That's my it's a group that I have of great people. We all just have a great time sharing stuff together. I'mAwakeNowWhat.com is the best place to find me. I have a couple businesses in the natural foods industry. TourmalineSpring.com, LivingNuts.com. And I wrote a book called The Fight to Enlight. Initiation through the heart is the only way to win. I highly recommend people reading it if they haven't. It's a book that I never intended to put out to the public, just so personal, but I did it because it's an objective on, even though it's a memoir and it's about my life experiences, I wrote it in an objective way so that it's about us. So that's me. If anybody has any questions, now is the time to ask. And it looks like my dear friend, my soul sister Martha said, the karmic wheels turn to liberate. That's it. They do. Ultimately, they do. If we stay stuck in this mechanized version of reality, that quote unquote they, which is just an unresolved aspect of us that we've allowed to run rampant for so long, if we keep allowing that to be the predominant bulk of where we focus our attention, yeah, we can expect probably something pretty unfriendly or pretty sad or painful to exist. But if we allow the natural, organic nature of our true essence to be the bulk of what we focus on, we are offered the opportunity to rise above the conditioning both of our past in this world and of every other lifetime we could have potentially ever lived ever before in any place at any time, no matter what. We are that powerful. We have within us something that, oh my God, it only takes a few people to know and realize and wake up to, and then choose to live fully from that place for all of this to change for everybody forever. That's who I am. That's what I care about. That's all I care about. So thank you for having me on, brother. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was an awesome conversation, and I would love to come on and chat with you anytime. And appreciate you a lot, brother. That was awesome. It's great having this connection to where we can just spit and talk and feed off of each other's energy, and just get this off of our consciousness, right? Because that's what my goal is to expand people's consciousness and make them and help them to question their reality, right? That's what I think a lot of us really want to do at this time, and that's most important. And the biggest thing that I could say, saying off of what you just spoke about, is that it's an individual liberation, right? That it starts with us, right?
Yeah.
And whenever we free ourselves internally and externally, then we in turn free the collective, and we can basically move on and liberate everyone. But it starts from within, right?
Thank you. Thank you. And that's what people like me, people like you, there's a lot of others who are about to be known that are coming out. Like, there is support. You're not alone. Like, what, no matter what you're going through, Ryder and I share some old difficulties, some things that were really challenging to both of us. Like, it doesn't matter what you went through. Like, you're not alone. like, your success is our success. Like, the new way to gauge success is not going to be monetary. Okay, it's not going to be, oh, I got the most of this. It's going to be, wow, I love this life. I love the energy that I am, and I love you because you love that too. And wow, what potential can we take our connection to, our friendship? Like, these are the types of things that have the potential to become so much more valuable than any of the things that we've been quote unquote taught to prioritize as being valuable. So thank you, Ryder. Thank you so much for having me on and for all of this. And let's hope it reaches a million people and changes a million different lives for the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting it on your group, your Facebook group, and I appreciate everything that you've done for everyone. And I love you, my friend.
All
Appreciate
right.
you.
I love you too, brother. Thank you. And again, all the links to everything to find Ryder, subscribe to his podcast, all of that is below because we got to get more people knowing about more conscious people and grow this stuff and spread it. And look, we all want a healthy, happy, loving place to live. Period. It's that simple. So you got us, we got you, we can do this. All right. See you guys soon.